Hello YouTube, Robin Hood Bricks here, and today I thought we'd do a bit of cargo train action with a new cargo train engine. Now I say this is a new cargo train, it's clearly not. It's from set 60052, which is actually from 2014, but it's new to me in that I recently purchased just the engine portion of this set. Now that's partially because I didn't need most of the rest of the set because I've actually been buying it in bits ever since 2014 really. The first thing I bought of that set was the yellow cargo yard with the sort of overhead rail system and so on. Then I think I bought the truck next, and then I think I bought the car with all the electric reels on the back, the big green round ones. And then eventually I bought the car with the cow in it. And now I've bought the train engine itself. So the only thing I'm actually missing from that original set nowadays is actually the blue pallet carriage, which is probably the least interesting of the lot. But with hindsight, I really should have bought the whole thing in one go and saved myself a bit of money. Now, as many of you will know, I go for maximum density in my city. And as a result, I have as few laps of track or loops of track as possible because it just takes up so much space. Each single piece of track pretty much takes up a quarter of a base plate. So if you add up a loop, it takes up more than any airport might, or any railway station, or any even bigger than my beach and boardwalk area or something like that. So with that in mind, I want to have as few loops of track as possible. So if I'm going to have very few, and in this case it's actually only 2 loops of track, I want to make them as dense and as used as possible. And the way I get around that is by having the longest trains I can possibly manage. And that means they're actually filling pretty much an entire side of my loops in one go. And it might even get to the point where there's more train on the track than there is spare track without a train on it. I don't know. That might be a bit absurd. Maybe that's a step too far, but that's definitely the direction we're heading towards. Now that does mean a couple of things. A negative point is that if we're going to have these ridiculously long trains, we can't have any sidings to park one train in and let another have its turn. Because if each of the trains is so ridiculously long to fill more than one side of the loop, then essentially you would need a siding at least that long plus a switch track as well. And there's just no room for that physically in the entire room. So the only way I'd be able to put in sidings is if I had a lot shorter trains, but then I could have more of them. But I've chosen to go the other way because when I've got them all running, I want to have as much train on show at one time as possible. And a parked train just ain't that exciting. So the plus side of this is that I can just add as much as I like to each of my trains. And in this case, the cargo train, which is currently pulled on its own by my red engine from 60098, which I call the Beast. But now I can actually add another engine to the exact same train. It's quite common for very long cargo trains to be pulled by more than one engine. And although I could have got 2 Beasts, for example, and had the same one twice, I do like a bit of variety. That's another one of my design rules. So if I'm going to have diversification, I need to have a second different engine. So this will make my train even longer by a good 32 studs or so. And it also will give me the power of another power functions motor. The Beast already has 2 motors, one front and one back, in order to pull all of the carriages on its own, which it does with ease. So I don't need this from that point of view. But with a third motor, it will do it even easier. So far so good. And it actually does offer us the other opportunity of actually splitting the cargo train into 2 at some future date, though past experiences of having 2 passenger trains running on my track at once were very mixed and very scary. So I'm not sure that's something I want to continue with 2 cargo trains on one track. Okay, so what modifications do I have to do to this train in order to get it on my track into a condition that I'm going to be happy with? Well, first of all, I'm going to have to add more power functions. At the moment, it's got the power functions motor at the back, but it doesn't have a battery box or anything else in here. So I'm going to have to add those. And I'm also wanting to add some power functions lighting to this system because it doesn't actually have any front lights at the moment. I mean, it's kind of got a token one up here, and it's got some token ones sort of hanging off the front here, but those aren't going to be able to be lit with a power functions light setup. It's quite different from something like the Beast, which has actually got these integrated lights, which is very easy to plumb a power functions light into, front and back on this one. Indeed, that's what I have done. So I have got lights on front and back on that one, but I think I'm going to have to make some amendments to this nose in order to accommodate a pair of lights. So I'm going to add the power functions first, which will include the kit of the lights, and then I'm going to change the bricks at the front in order to accommodate those lights. So let's get started. So as the majority of you will know, this is the infrared controller for power function systems, and I historically, at least up till now, have used one of these controllers per train in my city. And that was fine when I only had 2 surface trains and 1 subway train. But now I'm getting more and more engines. It's going to be more and more of a problem to be juggling loads of these things. So in the past, I've color coded these with a bit of a 1x2 tile down here. So this one's red, so it represents the Beast, and some yellow 1x1 round plates here to represent its lights, which means that this dial would have controlled the motor of that train, and this one the lighting to turn them on and off. Now this has the limitations that it takes a whole controller to run one train, as I said. So what I want to do is consolidate these 2 functions onto one half of the controller. So what I could do is basically plumb the wiring for the lights on top of the wiring for the motor, and therefore both would be controlled by only one wheel. But the only problem with that is that when I turn the wheel just a little bit to get it moving very slowly, the lights will be on only very dimly. Also, when the train is stopped, the lights won't be on at all. So it's not that ideal. So what I really want to do is have the lights hardwired on. And what I mean by that is having them so when you turn on the train on the top, before you've even started playing with whether the motor's running or not, the lights are on. And that has the added benefit of basically meaning that you know you've got the train on, i.e. you won't leave it on accidentally when you leave the room or when you stop filming or something like that, because you can see that it's still on because the lights are on. And then the lights can be on in a station or whatever. So I really like that idea. So what I'm going to do is move my lights so they're always hardwired on. So then only the motor is controlled with one half of the controller, leaving the other half of the controller to do exactly the same thing, but for a completely different train, meaning 2 trains and their lights, technically, are controlled with one controller. So the traditional setup would be a battery box plugged into the infrared receiver, and then to do the setup that we started with, you'd have the motor on one of the channels, i.e. the red left channel, and then you'd have the lighting, this set of wires, hanging on to the right. And then when you turned on the battery, you'd be able to move the motor with one, whoop, and you'd be able to move the lights with the other. Now, if I take the lights off and I put them onto that, that's the intermediate method that I was saying, that you could stack them on that and then they'll both be controlled by this. So the lights are on and the motor's on. Oop, stop that. But that's not ideal. So what I really need to do is have them hardwired on, as I described, which is basically doing that. So as soon as I turn the battery box on, the lights are on and they're always on, whatever I do with this, and then only the motor is controlled with this dial here. So far so simple, but the problem is that most trains can't accommodate stacked wires up here in the train body, because it would stick out of the top here, because the battery box is almost level with this sort of grey plate here. So what we need to do is create a sort of intermediate junction. And the way we do that is by bringing in a new piece, which is the short extension cable for power functions, which is part 8886. And what that enables us to do is to add on an intermediate position here with a connection, which can then be connected with both the infrared receiver and the light box, like that, with the motor attached as usual to the receiver there. And this does look a bit of a tangle, and it is very hard to get it all into a train, but that means that when I turn this on, the lights are on, and when I use this, it controls the motor, but it's all working all the time without stacking going on here. And that's what I'm going to do, not only in the blue train, but in the red one, my subway train, and both of my passenger trains as well. And it just means that I should be able to get all 4 of those trains then, or all 5 of the engines, onto 2 of these controllers. So I'm going to have the Beast and the new blue one on just one wheel. Now, a lot of people say, well, why don't you use powered up rather than power functions? It's much newer. It's got much more interesting sort of technology. You can control it with your phone. You can control it when it's out of line of sight. Well, my Lego room isn't so big that I need it out of line of sight for very long. It will go through a tunnel, sure, but it's not a massive problem. This system is a heck of a lot cheaper than powered up. Secondly, I can't have this hardwired on powered up because the box will only take 2 wires, one on each channel, and that is it. Until they improve the technology, that would mean I would be limited to the original setup that we had right at the beginning and nothing more. And I couldn't even do what I've done with the Beast, which is have 2 motors and 2 lights. So 4 things on one battery box. It just isn't possible. You can have 2. You could have 2 motors, which would be on separate wheels, or you could have 1 motor and 1 light on separate wheels, and that's it. And you're paying quite a lot of extra money for the privilege, of course. So I do think powered up is very useful, and I will be using all of the powered up things that I've got so far as part of the new passenger train, for example, 60197. I'll be using those in my fairground to power some rides and things as well, so they definitely won't go to waste. And there the added technology might actually be a benefit, because if I can bring any sort of programming or anything into it to incorporate sort of stops or periods of action and then inaction, that might make the fairground a lot more dynamic. So I'm really looking forward to learning more about powered up when I get to the fairground proper. Right, so first of all, I think we need to get all of this kit into the blue train, and then we can try and accommodate these lights into the front of that train. Unfortunately, you do have to take this train almost completely apart, it seems, in order to get all these power functions in. But there is a little sort of tunnel all the way up to the front once you've taken off the sort of front panel and so on to get in there. So the first thing I think to do is to get our lights, power functions lights, and actually kind of pin in that sort of intermediate block in about this position underneath the cab, and that means that this whole front section of lights can be coiled up in this area that's hollow, and then this whole bit of cable can link up with all the rest of the electrical equipment. So if I just put the rest of this cab back in there and have it kind of pinned in like that, then that will help it be held firmly in position. So that's just peaking there, and then I should be able to coil up this cord here in order to connect with the rest about there. So this is going to be very fiddly to do, so leave me to do it off camera for a minute and then I'll pop back. So from under the front of the cab, where that middle bit of the power functions light is, all the way to here is coiled underneath the man's chair, underneath his brown section here. And this is the top one of the 3 elements of the power functions that are stacked on top of each other. And you can see how difficult it is to arrange all of this, in that we've got to get all of this wire that's excess completely flat and folded very neatly, just in order to get the pieces back into position. And it really is a squeeze to enable us to get the battery box back on and this last cord to be able to reach. There we go. So it is actually all in there now. So I can turn this on and the lights are hardwired on. So that's that working. And we'll just check the motor while we're here. Yep, whoop. Stop. Yep, that's working. So now all I need to do is piece the rest of the train back together around this, and then we can focus on the nose. Another thing I want to do before I move on to actually doing the modification, the main one at the front, is actually one on the top middle. And that's because when you add on all of the roof structure onto the lovely engine, and you put in this bit which sort of covers the main part of the battery and performs the switch to switch it on and off, you're still left with this hole here. And I didn't realise that hole there existed, because this is where the infrared receiver is, so it's not for that. But you can see right inside there, maybe you can't with the camera being what it is, but you can probably see the end of the battery box there and the wire, and I can see with my eyes in real life the fact that we've got that entire stack of power functions bricks down there as well, and it just looks a bit odd having a hole there. So what I thought I would do is do a slight modification where if I take this off and take this off again, I could just add this little setup. It's just a 2x2 plate, a 2x3 plate and a 2x2 tile. Now I'm going to put that there, and then I'm going to put everything else back. And then I'm going to pop that back on there. And then it's completely sealed and flat. Button still works. And we're ready now to do our light amendment. Awesome. Right, so on to adding lights to the front of our train. Now, this isn't the worst offender done by Lego for adding lights onto the front of a train, which I think makes it look so much better that they really should accommodate it more readily, because the Beast, the red train, all you have to do is wire the lights in. It's all designed to take them, right from the start, so it's very easy to do so. This one, at least it does have a cavity behind this front plate, but then this front plate is a complete blocker for the lights, which do need a bit of space to go into because of this sort of back portion, which means we can't really put it very easily into this light in the cab without real restructuring, and we definitely can't put it into these two hanging off the front because there just isn't enough space. But having said that, this train is still a lot better than the recent green one, 60198, because that just has a completely solid nose from front to back, which means you'd have to do major reconstruction work in order to get lighting in, which I think is a real shame. So anyway, the main issue with this one then is this 4x4 plate that we can't sort of get through, and I definitely don't want to drill holes or anything like that. So with that being so solid, we really have to make a change there. Now, what I could do is completely remove these stickered pieces, but I don't want to do that because I think they're real part of the set and look rather good. But what I can do is, without using this plate, but just to use it as a guide at the moment, kind of have two lights vertically above each other in a groove between these two curved slopes. And I think that'll look the best. Now, it does mean that we're going to have kind of a 5 wide front, including the lights, 2 wide on each side and 1 extra in the middle to make 5, which does mean that the light structure will kind of overhang the front of that nose a little bit. But I don't think that's a great problem, so I'm willing to accept that minor issue in order to get lights into this. Now obviously we can't burrow straight through a 4x4 plate, so we will have to get rid of that, but we'll use it elsewhere in our build. We'll put these to one side. And then really what I've got to do first of all is deconstruct the original nose. So let's do that. Take those off. Just lift up the front of the cab a bit just so I can whip off these sub-assemblies here. I want to leave that bit. There we go. Right, and then I need to take off this 4x4 modified plate here. So I'll remove these lights temporarily and see if I can get at it with my brick separator, or maybe I'll just be better pulling it off like that. There we go. Right. So this is our starting point. Having removed this, the side walls, and all of that sort of top construction. And the first part of my build is to kind of replace the 4x4 black part because we need to do it in a more modified and nuanced way. So what I've got to do that is 2 of these 1x4 with a stud on each end. And they are going to be placed kind of on each side of that setup, and that holds the front on again, so that's kind of like that. And then I need a 2x2 plate which goes next in the middle at the back, then a jumper plate, and that's going to take that 5th stud in the middle, and just so it's complete, a 1x2 tile as well. So basically we've replaced that 4x4 modified plate with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 other pieces that do a similar job, but as I say, a lot more complicated sort of setup. And while we're here, we may as well add these lights back on, because that's what that end stud is for on each of those, is to hold these lights on, because I didn't want to remove any of the features that we have from the original set. So that's good. Next, we need to add back this. Now this was part of the original set, so we can just put that on there, and that gives us our base layer of blue. Next, what we need is some of the original 3 long bricks, 1 on each side. And then on the end, we want one of these 1x1 modified bricks. And that's going to be holding on these pieces ultimately. There we go. And then we need to build this structure back up to the level of the orangey flamish yellow stripe. So we need 2 1x4 plates stacked on top of each other on each side, like that. And then we need the stripe itself. So you need 1 more of these that you would have had in the original set, because we took 2 off, but we need 3 now. So I'm going to have 1 on one side, 1 along the back here, which will be underneath this cab, like that. And then the 3rd one along there. So now we've got the complete stripe, and we can actually push the cab back down into position as well there. Now at this stage I can put back the 2x4 brick, which will cover the same position it did before. And then I kind of want to make another one, but make it kind of hollow. So what I'm doing is using a 2x4 plate and 4 1x2 plates to make another 2x4 brick, but kind of with a gap missing, which will help us accommodate those lights. So therefore we've got a slightly longer nose, and we can then put these back. I'm just going to put them back temporarily, because this is where they're going to go. And what I'm doing is I'm attaching that stud there to this round portion. So it's not going in one of the normal stud positions, it's going in the one in the middle bottom there. And therefore it goes like that. So you can start to see now exactly what we're trying to achieve. It's a bit wonky because it's not got bricks to line up against, but that is what we're going to do. And we're going to have our vertical column of lights in between those two. And you can see there's perfectly loads of room behind there to accommodate all the coiled up wire and these sort of lumpy bits at the back. So I'll take those off temporarily. And then we need to make a column with a normal 1x1 brick, then 2 of these sort of headlight bricks, which are modified bricks, one on top of the other. And I'm going to put some transparent round tiles on there. And then just to cap it off, a 1x1 tile in blue. So that column goes on our jumper plate there, and is that middle bit that we were missing before. Now obviously I need to have all of this attached into the back of those headlight bricks with all of the wires stuffed in this hole as well in order for this to work. So I'll do that next. And there we are. It does take a bit of neat folding really to get those wires in well enough. If you just try and stuff them in, basically it ends up pushing this whole structure too much forward. But I think you can see now that it is all lined up, all looking good. And I think the fact that we've kept this nice stickered area is really important. And if we look from the back, the overhang is very subtle actually, quite small indeed, and I don't think that really poses much of a problem. In fact, I think it might even look a bit better than the original being broad like that, like it's a sort of a battering ram sort of hammerhead front or something like that. Anyway, the proof is in the pudding, so let's turn on the engine. And there we go, there's the hardwired lights coming straight on without any need to use a remote control. Yeah, and I'm really happy with that. That looks absolutely fantastic and very natural. And also a really good contrast to the Beast, because obviously the Beast's lights are side by side and these being vertical just makes them a bit more different and my city a little bit more diverse. Now, one thing I was considering was maybe removing the 1x1 tile from the top and just changing it to a cheese wedge piece in blue, because I thought that might sort of represent a bit of a better profile, maybe like it's got sort of a bit of a car badge type thing on the front. Do you know what? I don't think I do prefer that actually. So I think I'll go back to the tile and put that in, because that's absolutely flush with the main part of the front of the train. So there we go. Do tell me what you think. Okay, so I thought I'd just take us briefly into Lego Digital Designer just to show a second methodology I use for adding lights to this train. So this is the original train with no changes whatsoever, and next to it is the method that we just did. And as we've already seen, the shortfalls of that method are that there's this slight sort of lip or overhang on this edge, which I don't personally mind, but you know, it might be that you want a more smooth body without that going on. So I did actually design this as an alternative. Now, it has its own positives and negatives. It does solve the problem that there isn't that overhang, but in a way, instead, all it does is push it back one whole stud by having kind of an indent here between these two pieces. And the reason why I didn't go with this methodology in the end is actually because in order to put that 5 wide bit of body in here, it really needed to be mounted on tiles and jumper plates and so on. And in order to do that, I had to move this railing piece one stud to the right. But if you move it one stud to the right on the original train, it would block the door. So we actually need to add a complete new one stud wide setup in here in order for it to not block the door. But then the door goes down one stud and so does everything else. But there is room at the end, so the whole train, you can see now if you look at all of these three in a row, the whole train has to be moved down one stud in order to accommodate all of that. So it subtly changes the proportions and, well, it looks roughly the same, but the nose has got this weird sort of T shape on it now. So anyway, that had a lot more changes to do, looked arguably a bit more lumpy, and as I said before, I don't really mind this slight overhang, so I went with the simpler version. And you can also see up here, there is the area that we filled in that was very visible into the guts of the train before. Right, that's the design stage done then. Right, so here we are in the Lego room, and here is our cargo train, powered by the Beast, but to be joined by our blue train, which arguably we need to name. So I think the Beast needs a partner, and as a result, maybe we should call it the Beastess, I don't know, or Blue Bess or something like that. I don't know, I think it should have a feminine name, this one. So I'm going to add it in pride of place in front of the Beast at the moment. I'm not sure if that's where I'm going to keep it permanently, but nonetheless, I think it'll be a good place to have it today, given that today is its video. So I'm going to turn on both of them, and then I can get my single controller. I do have to turn on the Beast's lights to start with, but I will be hardwiring that soon, so it's the same. But we've got the lights on the Beast S already, and there we go. Look how easy that pulled away with 3 motors powering that train. Even though it's ridiculously long, it doesn't have any job at all. All of those carriages, and maybe we'll be adding more carriages in due course. Who knows? It is ridiculously long. As I said before, it actually is longer than a whole side of my tracks. You see when it hits that corner, it's still going around that one, which does make it very fun. But you can see that light. Oh yeah, that looks good, doesn't it? The 2 vertical lights really look fantastic. Yep. Let's get a low position here. Very good. You kind of can't see the Beast's lights as much now. You can see the ones at the back, but maybe in lower lighting conditions that'll look even better. Right, let's get the white train going as well. Get its lights on as well. Now I'm not going with the new passenger train today, just because if we're focusing on the cargo trains, there's no way on earth I'm going to have 2 passenger trains running on the same track. If you haven't seen that, it's absolute mayhem, and well worth looking out for the new train in town video, which that was part of. But yeah, I think it looks pretty good. I like the diversity of a red one and a blue one. I was thinking at one point of having the yellow cargo engine from quite a few years ago now, and the more modern green one, so I had a yellow, red, blue and green engine, but I think that's probably massive overkill, but maybe one day. Right, shall we get the tram going as well? I think so. See if I can do that one-handed without destroying everything. There we go. That was relatively risky. And of course its lights are on as well, and they're already hardwired actually, so even when that wasn't moving, its lights, which are also front and back, are permanently on. And I do find that it does help me not leave any of these trains on when I leave the Lego room, which, if you're as forgetful as I am, is actually a really good benefit. I do just love that spinning cement wagon still. Right, let's get a shot of it coming into the station. Yeah, those vertical lights really do look absolutely great. That's obviously been hit by something. Straighten those up. Let's get a nice shot here. I deliberately have the cargo train going a lot slower than the passenger train because that's kind of how I feel it would be. This is by no means its full speed, especially with those 3 engines on. Maybe we should do a full speed test. Maybe that's a good idea, maybe that's suicidal, but let's try it. Let's get some faster cargo train action. Oh my lord, that's scary. No, I'm slowing it down. that was yeah, when I can't really look at it properly to see if it's surviving well. But you can see there's a lot of power there to get this thing going very fast indeed now, with 3 motors. Great, let's get some low shots and maybe a train cam. So I think those improvements to the train make it look a lot better. We haven't really noticed the hole in the roof, which is a good thing. Now it's covered. And this twin light vertically above each other, I really like that. I think it's a really good contrast, and it keeps those stickers that I really liked as well. So I think it's a good system for conversion. So do tell me what you think, and do let me know if you can do any better than Beastess or Blue Bess as the name for this blue engine. But I think that's where we're going to have to leave it for today. So thank you very much for watching. It is appreciated. Do remember to like, comment and subscribe for more awesome LEGO videos. And next time on Robin Hood Bricks, we'll be doing a brick haul, as usual on Wednesday. And then we're doing part 3 of our hospital mock build on Friday. So, see you then.